Tonight's the test. Tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks. I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn. I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Ten trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money in the dark. 8 towers of iron surround the desert town. On a cold December morning, 7 martyrs knocked them down. 6 fathers still waiting for their 6 sons to come home. 5 mothers who know better and accept that they're gone. 4 years I've been hunted, still I breathe free. 3 times I shot the sheriff and did not spare the deputy. 2 prayers I'm praying until we're together. 1 promise I'm keeping tonight and forever. I'll never turn. I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now. We're with you to the end. And hopefully we keep pushing the end off just another week or 2 or 3 or 4 or a month, or a couple of years wouldn't hurt either, because the end is right on the horizon as the world is starting to spin into 2 very certain types of Armageddon: the financial economic collapse, the economic Armageddon, and of course the possible biblical Armageddon that our leaders are trying to foment in the Middle East with the next war scenario that is well on the horizon. As we come into the studio tonight, we find out the USS Stennis is on its way back to the Persian Gulf. So Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense, was on the ship telling the crew that their leave is cut short and they're going to immediately return next week to the Middle East. Of course, Iran threatened that ship if it did come back. They say they're going to punch their lights out. So we'll see what's going to happen. Seemingly it's just a change. They're going to relieve USS Enterprise and send her home to the scrapyard. But I think basically everyone in the conspiracy genre look at USS Enterprise as the ship that is going to be eliminated to be the false flag operation to turn the war on, and then it allows the United States not to have to deal with all those very difficult environmental issues in scrapping a nuclear aircraft carrier. Or maybe they'll just turn it into a museum and make it a glow-in-the-dark park somewhere in a good coastal port city. You see, we're controlled very, very much by this corporate Borg. The corporate Borg that's basically the slave of the New World Order. Our leaders don't ever tell us too much. Well, from time to time they tell us they're part of the New World Order, but they don't allow free speech. And that's something that's very, very important. When people exercise free speech, then frequently they get a good beating. And one of the ones who did get a good beating was a chap we wanted to use in a video. And he was busted because he disagreed with the government. He's a former U.S. Marine, and he said there were a lot of things the government did that he didn't like. So his name was Marine Rob, R-A-U-B, as opposed to R-O-B Brandon. So he was taken into custody by the FBI and the Secret Service because he posted a few things on Facebook. See, something maybe they don't understand in the politically correct genre. You see, when you're a Marine, you're taught to be tough, and you talk tough, and you act tough because you are tough. And you say a whole lot of things that aren't politically correct because you're a Marine. Leatherneck. Maybe these Marines in this generation aren't as tough as the ones that would go back to the Korean War or World War II, guys who fought all those island campaigns and that horrible slaughter in various places. So maybe they're not as tough as those guys, but they're still tougher than the average bear. So when they speak, a lot of things are about violence and implied violence because they're trained to kill. And you talk like that. So if you've been a Marine for a while, that's part of your shop talk. So the fact that you post a Facebook page and you write on it and you express your opinions, and maybe you're a Marine because you didn't qualify to be a scientist somewhere because you weren't smart enough, so your grasp of the English language might not be as great as some of the people reading your blog that are all basically chicken shit idiots who evaded military service or anything that could be violent. So they read these things and it's, just like they've never heard words like that, and they wonder sometimes if some of these things are anatomically possible that are put into words and phrases. So right away that they label the individual, some sort of mental case and a dangerous desperado, etc., etc. But I think if he was a fully trained Marine, trained to kill and combat hardened, then he wouldn't need to post a Facebook page. He'd just kill you. And that's all you need to know. But he's trying to write about his opinions, and sometimes some of these opinions that some of these soldiers have may include bouts of post-traumatic stress disorder or other difficulties that need to be understood as well. Of course, the government that hired you, trained you, and provided for you doesn't care, so they just arrest you and throw you to a mental hospital because you had the audacity to think that you have constitutional rights of free speech and freedom of assembly and things like that. So anyway, this chap has been released, but we guess maybe we can start the video. Will this work? Yes.
Welcome back to the show, folks. I'm actually working on getting some breaking news for you here, if we could. So just give me 1 second. It's something that you are going to want to hear if we can make it work. We have one segment left of the show, and I was just informed of a potentially alarming event that took place, and I want to get more information. In that vein, if we get this person that we want to get on the show here in a minute or so, we will have the opportunity to get further information. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not totally abreast of all the details. I'm going to learn about it just like you are at the same time. From what I've been told, somebody was taken into custody, and they were taken into custody obviously against their will by federal agents, including the FBI. The reason was not given. No evidence of the capture of said individual has been recorded. It's all, and I gotta tell you, this isn't normally our thing. We don't normally cover what would be considered outside topics. But she's going to join us now because I gotta tell you, if you read the quick report that I read, you would get goosebumps. So Kathleen Thomas, welcome to the show, Kathleen. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share what's going on in our country today. Thank you.
Well, no problem. Tell us, please, what is going on, because like I told the listeners, I don't even have all the details. So quickly kind of give us a rundown of what you're here to tell us. Sure.
Well, last night, I guess at approximately 7 o'clock, I was not at the property. I own two properties, and this is a rental property. My son does live there. And he was there. Everyone had left that also resides on that property. And the FBI, Secret Service, Chesterfield County Police Department showed up in a swarm on the property. They knocked on the door. And I do now know this side of the story because I have good news. Just spoke with my son about 20 minutes ago, so I have more details. Good. Yes. So what happened was they questioned him on his Facebook posts. He's been putting posts about what he sees going on in the country. He's a former Marine, decorated Marine. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan, came back about a year ago. He does not have PSTD. He's not suffering from anything like that. He's very sane, very sound-minded. I speak to him quite often. I have another son. We're just strong patriots, and we believe in our country. We believe in our freedoms. We believe in our constitutional rights, and we're vocal about it. And we've done liberty marches, and we just stand for freedom. We're not violent, but we are very serious about what we believe. And he is a patriot, and he was questioned about why he was talking about the government the way that he was, and he proceeded to
Well, give us some
explain to
examples
them-
of that. Hold on.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did he say about the government?
He's basically said that they're lying, that I can actually go to his Facebook post. If you give me 1 second, I'll
Sure.
go on there and do that, and I'll read some of them. I don't think
But
they've been
basically,
deleted.
while you're looking
To the
that
best
up,
of my knowledge.
it's basically discontent with the current way the government is operating, and he was vocal in his expression that he's upset with the government, which is completely a patriotic thing to do. Matter of fact, it is the patriotic thing to do by our founding fathers' definition. So he was being true to the founding fathers' call, and the FBI, Secret Service, somebody up the chain had a problem with it. And you talked to your son. He was taken into custody last night. Where is he today? What state is he in? Has he been abused in any way? What's going on currently?
Yeah. Well, actually, here's what happened. Let me just continue, and then I'll get those Facebook posts for you. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
But what happened was, he was told, questioned about why he was making those comments, and he was very calm. He was not violent. He said, and I was not there, so I'm going by what Brandon told me, but he basically said, well, I have some disagreements with the country and the government and the way that it's being run and things that are going on, and proceeded to share some of those things with them, and they said, well, you need to come with us. And he did not resist their arrest. So the problem here is I've been told many, many lies, okay? Here's the problem. The problem is, well, let me tell you the story that went down, and I'll tell you what they told me. But he was handcuffed, was not read his rights. I want that to be heard very clear. He was not read his rights. He was handcuffed, put in the back seat of a Chesterfield County, Virginia Police Department vehicle, and taken directly to John Randolph Hospital, Psychiatric Hospital in Hopewell, Virginia, and that is where he is right now. Now, what I was told by an FBI agent, her name is Agent Sherry Granger. She called me on the phone, and she said, I'm with the FBI, and we have taken your son. And he has been arrested by the Chesterfield County Police Department because he assaulted and resisted arrest. He assaulted an officer and resisted arrest. This is what she told me. And he's been arrested and taken to the Chesterfield County Police Department. I said, okay, is that where he's at now? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to, call over there, head over there. She began to ask me questions if he was, having any issues relating with people as far as, being violent or things of that nature. I said, no, he's fine. I said he has strong beliefs in his country. He's a patriot. There's things that he does not agree with that's going on in our government, and he was very vocal about it. I said, I know he's posted on Facebook. I've seen those posts, and he truly wants to see some changes in our country. And I said, now, the best of my knowledge, we still have the First Amendment right. I'm thinking freedom of speech, correct? She said, yes, we still have freedom of speech. I said, okay, so what is the problem? And she said, well, the threats that he was making were terrorist in nature. And I said, okay. All right, well, I will go ahead over to the county police department and see if I can't figure out things there. So she wouldn't give me any more information. I went over there, and after about, 15, 20 minutes of the runaround, I was told a supervisor would come out. And a supervisor did not come out, but two police officers walked in from out of the street there, walked in, and they introduced themselves to me. And I said, oh, do you know what's going on? And we have this on video, by the way. All of this is on video. We don't have Brandon being confronted by the FBI, but we have him taken away in handcuffs and put in the backseat of a car because the other son arrived and got that on videotape.
Okay,
but,
I only have a little over a minute.
Okay, I think that gives us a good background on what was going on. Someone exercised their rights of free speech, and the government snoops and spies on everything you do. And they take things out of context because they don't have a clue who you are, and they look at your words and they twist them and manipulate them into whatever little state the pansies get frightened at, and then do all kinds of nasty things to you, like throw you in jail or a mental hospital. Because, of course, anyone who believes in their country, anyone who believes in the Constitution, has to be a so-called terrorist or some evil thing, especially if they've been in the military. What a disgusting state of affairs. That just gives you some sample of why it is so important to have alternative media. That's what freed him. The fact that this show on Genesis picked up his cause right away and reported it to many other people, and other shows picked it up and reported it to many people. We could apply the moral suasion pressure to say, let him go. And ultimately they have to let him go. In fact, sometimes it becomes so distasteful they have to spit them out because they realize they have no moral, legal, or other type of standing in these scenarios. And that's why I always say it's very important for you to fight for your brother or sister, even if you don't know them. Because basically, you're fighting for yourself. The battle you win today is the battle you won't be in tomorrow. The one you could be in tomorrow is the one that's for you. So we don't even want to get to that stage. We fight for the others. And even if you're fighting for people you don't even know, more power to us. That's how you change things. It was a movie some years ago that Angelina Jolie put out about, them kidnapping her son and replacing this kid with another kid who wasn't her own. It's a true story. And on her way to a very large Christian radio station to bemoan her fate, she was basically kidnapped by the authorities and put in a mental hospital. They've been doing this trick for a long time. And when people found out, not only was she the cause célèbre in alternative media, but she was also the cause célèbre where the listeners of this show went down to City Hall and just started protesting until they spit her out. But the links that they went to, that they actually gave her another boy and said that was your son, and when she found out it wasn't, they wrote her off as insane and committed her to a mental hospital. True story. And the mother would know who her son was because the big piece of identification was one was circumcised and one was not. So when you give the boy a bath, you know that one wasn't yours. And they force this down her throat, just like they try to force anything and everything down our throats to take it. And as long as you don't change the channel, you have to take it. We have to stand together as citizens of our respective countries, say not just no, but hell no. Those documents, constitutions, bills of rights, are fundamental. Fought for, bled over. And the people that won these liberties that we take for granted were, in their day, terrorists. And they had to use force and violence to get to that stage. No one gave you or anyone else anywhere on the planet Earth your rights. They were taken by force of arms. That's why they want to take the arms away again, because the people who lost in the first place want you back where you belong, on your knees, enslaved, indebted slaves to be mastered over. So frequently I always hear the surrender terms in all these things where people talk about violence. Oh, no one was reporting any violence. Well, violence got us where we were. Women didn't get the right to vote until they got violent. Men didn't get the right, commoner men didn't get the right to vote until they got violent. The Bill of Rights never came about until people got violent. It's the only thing the New World Order, Illuminatiists, understand is violence. Masses of people just saying no, and sometimes even to the point of war, saying no. The English Civil War brought about the changes that we all inherited pretty much around the English-speaking world, including the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many of the other former colonies, and to some degree Britain too, but it's backtracking to go back to give all those hard-won, fought battles for rights back to the crown, to the monarchies, to the elitists, and in time to the corporations, because you don't even know where they came from, and they're taking away all the foundations on how you got them, and teaching you so you won't even miss them. Very good strategy. And as we said, one of the rays is, they always scare us with false flag operations. The big one's going to be the war in the Middle East. Israel saying they have a 30-day war plan, that they're prepared to go out on all fronts. And I have to, shake my head, listen to it rattle, and just say, okay, you've got a 30-day war plan. What does Iran have? An unending jihad until the Messiah returns? Don't think they're the same. So you may have your little dance all set up, but they might not want to do it your way, and then after the 30 days, they might not want to stop, and they might keep going and going and going. Plus, you open the door to all kinds of variables that you cannot control and don't understand. Fundamentally, that can be the fact that Iran and Syria have a defense pact, and the both of them will enter the fray. And that's one of the big reasons why Syria is being destabilized at such an extensive risk to its own country, because they want to take them out of the game so that they can't ally or respond to Iran's need when the time comes. They want them to be a dead duck, so Iran is isolated and alone. A brilliant strategy, but a devious one, because we don't really need to go that way or that far. One of the other very important things is there are other wild cards, specifically Russia and China, especially Russia at this point in the game, because they have a naval base in Syria, which they may not be able to keep if Syria is destabilized, destroyed, or taken out of the picture. They also don't want NATO's fleas to be on their skin by destabilizing these two nations and getting closer to Russia. They will be right on top of them. Just as America wouldn't want Canada to be taken over by a potential hostile, or Mexico, and be between a rock and a hard place. Even without reciprocal treaties like NATO, they would just say, hey, that's far enough. We're not letting you get any closer, and Russia's going to be the same way. So we have to wonder, and this is the wild card, if by accident NATO bombs, strafes, kills, destroys some Russian military assets by mistake, or that on purpose Russia just says enough is enough and starts deploying troops in combat modes where we start squaring off Russia and NATO. And sooner or later, it may start out as a little brush fire type of thing, a little bit here, a little bit there, but then maybe, one starts getting an edge on the other one, and they start losing and resorting to tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. WMDs in the Bush language. And that could escalate very, very quickly to something far worse. That is a very, very, very important thing to understand. China could just pull the plug on America financially and destroy them very, very quickly. We posted in the video section a very old movie, one I hope you will take the time to watch, Conspiracy Night at the Movies, The War Game. The War Game is very important. The world I look in this blog as the runaway freight train. Love that picture, very cute. Because that's what we're on, a runaway freight train. And who knows where it's going to go. We have two choices, economic Armageddon and the military Armageddon. But in the War Game, these are some stills that I posted for people who may not have seen it. It is chilling, very chilling. Some people might find it disturbing, but it's the closest simulation you're going to get to what a nuclear war is all about. The just over-ending destruction that is involved. It is very important for you as a citizenry, as a populace, to be like our Marine friend and grab our politicians on a short leash, like a dog that's going to pee in somebody else's yard, and pull them back and make them understand very, very well and very, very surely that you don't want to go down that road to enrich banksters and gangsters and thieves. Because you'll look like some of the people in this docu-movie. Your flesh will be burned off. They worked out you have 350 critical casualties per doctor with no hospitals. So you're in like tent medicine. No one gets their wounds treated to a great extent, and you're walking around with large gaping wounds in the face, third-degree burns. The start of the kerfuffle is like I tell you about the duck and cover. A little boy's walking through a backyard and he doesn't know to duck and cover. He doesn't know much of anything really, and his eyeballs are actually boiled. And it's a boiling that goes beyond like boiling in water. It'd be like boiling in oil, where you can get way hotter than the boiling temperature of water. So he has these third-degree burns in the humors of his eyes. They may even explode from the pressure. And of course, that radiant heat goes into your brain, and it's just like someone's taking, a big stick and hammering it through your skull. You're going to have to live with that, because there's no painkillers, there's no doctors, and there's no hospitals. It gets into, how they had to burn the bodies, how they sent out death squads. The police performed death squads to put people out of their misery. How they triage people, and the most seriously wounded are just put in a room to die. People executed by firing squad, food riots. How they give the food to the police and the military and deprive it from the civilian population, and the food riot starts where people go after the police and the military to eat, because you're going to die of starvation anyway. It is no game. All these things really happened in the firestorms and bombing raids in Germany, and this is what they based the scenarios of the nuclear war, the most closest equivalent to firestorm. This is why it is so important to get off your asses, like I said last week, and do something. Because like when they interviewed this girl at the beginning, they just go down the street and talk to the bobbleheads. Do you know what strontium-90 is? And they don't have a clue. But because you don't know, it doesn't mean you're going to be like those piles of corpses that were on the street, all twisted and mangled and burned up. Never mind the starvation, the lack of water, total no supplies of any description. The zone of destruction being something like 50 miles from the target area. So if you live within 50 miles of an airport, a major airport, civilian too, or military, or any military base, get out your little compass and draw a circle around what those things are around you. You're in the zone that's going to look like that movie. And that's what you're going to have to survive, even if you're from 50 to 100 miles. The Russians got a lot of old nukes that just make lots of megatons and lots of damage. So it really doesn't matter if they miss. I can assure you, just from being in the Toronto area and understanding the politics behind what was going on back in the day, Toronto was targeted for 4 nuclear weapons by the old Soviet Union bloc. It's not rocket science where they'd use them. At the time, we had Canadian Forces Base Downsview, which is still an airport. It can be converted back into an airport almost instantly and has a large underground facility. Guaranteed one target. Pearson or the Toronto International Airport, guaranteed one target. That airport is so big now it might even be set up for a double tap, 2 bombs. Draw your circles around that. Possibly even the island airport, because that can take out strategic runways and remove the downtown core. And maybe they got room for an extra one just to drop somewhere else, but guaranteed. That's the zone of destruction. You know where you live, draw your little circles, find out what you're inside. Guarantee you're going to have to live through the war game if we don't straighten these people out. It is not a game. Part of the problem, of course, is we see that the Russians sent a nuclear submarine, here's a picture of that type of class, not specifically that submarine, into the Gulf of Mexico. It was secretly patrolling there, completely unknown to the United States Navy, because they deactivated what was called SOSUS, the underwater surveillance system, and turned it over to like the greeny whale watchers for academic purposes, and they don't monitor the Russian submarines like they used to. But now that we're getting, to the Dukes Up stage again, these things are going to be coming off the coast. Even though this is a nuclear attack submarine, it has nuclear-armed cruise missiles and nuclear-armed torpedoes. it can still make a hell of a mess and kill millions of Americans. Russia wants to put bases into Cuba again. If you're old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know that was a very, 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 very difficult period of time that we almost went to the brink, they say. You can watch that in movie or documentary format all over the place. Very, very important. So those are just some of the little wild cards that we have to deal with this war scenario. One of the other facts is it is not recommended by former Israeli military chiefs of staff and intelligence people. They're saying it's a big mistake. And I see here in this BBC article, U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Martin Dempsey, held an unprecedented briefing at the Pentagon to warn against an Israeli strike. Then, of course, this General Dempsey had his plane customized while it came into Afghanistan recently, and an indirect round fired in his general direction shot up his plane. Was that an accident, or was that a bit of a warning from the deeper, darker forces in the world to say, hey, General, get with the program? Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait are urging their nationals to leave Lebanon. Another good sign that it's getting close to the brink, which is definitely where we don't want to go. So even if the Russians don't build missile launching systems, the fact that generally they're looking for a port in Cuba means that their ships, which do carry nuclear weapons, will be well within range of the United States. Just a hop, skip, and a jump, really, at Mach 2.5 or 3. They also want to build naval bases in Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam, the old naval base from the Vietnam War days, and the Seychelles Islands. They want to spend $712 billion this decade on defense spending because some idiot that was president of the United States decided to put a radar station in Poland and Romania, and I've said that for years from the moment he put it in. It's like rubbing salt in Putin's eyes and kicking him in the knees. And when he asks you, like, hey, why did you just kick me in the knees? You knee him in the nuts. Not a good game plan, not a good strategy. There's nothing to be gained by these radar installations that's worth taking us on a road that leads to the brink. Unless you're somebody like the Antichrist, maybe George Bush has worked very, very solidly in that form. Russia doesn't have much of a navy now, but the fact that it is nuclear armed and nuclear equipped makes it quite the threat. Underwater drones are being deployed into the waters off Iran. These are NATO drones to explore for mines and deactivate them. This Strait of Hormuz, it may be 21 miles long, but there's only 2 sea lanes that go through it, and they're 2 miles wide. So it's a pretty tight little dance with big ships and big weapons. Militants in Pakistan have attacked a Pakistani air base. The base in Camera carries maybe around 100 nuclear weapons. There was a big gunfight. The commander of the base was wounded. Not exactly a good deal either. That Islamic militants could maybe someday capture or acquire Pakistan's nuclear arsenal and do whatever. These are perilous times indeed. Where our New World Order friends are taking us, our leaders, our government, is to this place here. It's like the train going off the tracks. I like that picture. It was kind of cute. And, hope the author forgives me for borrowing it, but it summed up the story. Everybody on the train thinks everything's fine. Some nut like me says there's no bridge. The bridge is out. And everybody's just happily steaming along, oblivious. Or as one of my old police comrades used to use for a term, obliviousness, as a state of life, heading for that end of the tracks in perfect harmony. And when you get there, of course, it's obvious what happens. You fall into the brink. We don't want to get there. This whole concept of war and more war for the benefit of banksters, gangsters, and thieves has to end. And if it doesn't end, we're going to end. But of course, these sanctions on Iran aren't really working as well. Standard Chartered Bank chief was in New York with the Department of Financial Services to explain the fact that basically they're laundering or hiding $250 billion of transactions with Iran because these people believe they are free from any types of controls of things like nation states and their laws. It's just the poor guy at the bottom who has opinions and talks about them in public or posts them somewhere who is the ultimate terrorist. It's always been this way. Like I'm reading this book about the post-World War I era, the savage peace, and America was the same way. There's stories in there of a woman who was just dropping leaflets out of a window that expressed not even exactly an anti-war sentiment. Locked up for 15 years. People had their homes robbed, raided, their liberties taken. They had groups of volunteers. They called it like a Liberty League or something like that. They weren't even paid by the government or trained in any way, shape, or form. They were just like thugs. I guess Hitler would call them the brown shirts, but they just didn't wear brown shirts. They just dressed in disguise, and they would just go after people. And if you didn't have a pro-war sentiment, that was sedition, and they'd lock you up. A reporter from Sweden came to write a story about Russia and the Russian Revolution and Bolshevism, and he was arrested, put in jail. All his papers and notes were taken, and he was declared some sort of enemy of the state. Of course, the state took his two $5,000 bonds that he was carrying with him to finance his trip. They didn't have credit cards or mobile credit in those days exactly, so they robbed him of his money. But pressure from a lot of people, especially influential people, got him released. He left the United States quickly at that point, went back to Sweden. But you're just not allowed to have an opinion or to think for yourself. It's absolutely scandalous, but it's always been that way. So it's nothing new. Things that Obama's doing are nothing new. They practiced things like the NDAA before. They did even worse. They did lynching. It wasn't a law, but it was just, it happened and nobody did anything about it. There's lots of examples of that in this book. It's just absolutely scandalous. And then they found out frequently when they lynched somebody that they didn't do anything wrong. It was somebody else, and sometimes a white guy. So Goldman Sachs is giving warnings about the Armageddon on the other side. That's the economic or financial Armageddon. And they're telling people to get out of stocks before the fiscal cliff hits, or as in our little picture, the end of their tracks. Someone is listening to that very closely, George Soros. He's dumped a lot of his financials. Specifically, he got rid of JP Morgan, Citibank, or Citigroup, Goldman Sachs. So it's kind of funny, Goldman Sachs says get out of stocks and Morgan dumps their stocks. But he did get into a gold type of portfolio. I don't think it's real physical gold, but just like a gold SPDR gold trust. He bought 900,000 shares. So he sees the end of the road, and he's padding his assets. We also see a big spike in the price of gold today, a little bit yesterday, a lot more today, and as it may return, I don't know if that's the absolute breakout point. It's difficult to say because there's so many factors involved. But one of the big things that a lot of people are saying, I can't disagree out, like this article, get your money out. All legal bank deposit protections are now officially gone. And this is one of the other very, very, very important things that the people on the train and the smoking lounge have absolutely no idea about, is the game has been fundamentally changed because they depend on big media to tell them things, and even if they did, they probably don't listen too well anyway. That's one of the biggest problems we face with a lot of people, is they just don't listen. So this one money manager, Ann Barnhart, got out of the brokerage firms and returned funds to her customers because she described systemic problems with the entire financial industry and issued a warning about the stability of U.S. banks and the safety of individual deposit accounts. There's an honest woman. The article goes on to say that there's been an appeal in the federal courts from the 2007 collapse of Chicago futures broker Sentinel. What they did is they took individuals deposited funds that are supposed to be segregated from their investment funds, and they used them to do all kinds of things that they were never authorized to do without the knowledge and consent of the depositor. And they lost their money. The court ruled that that was okay. The fact that they have control of this money, they could do whatever they wanted with it. It's not on its own sufficient to rule as a matter of law that Sentinel acted with actual intent to hinder, delay, or defraud its customers. So therefore, all legal protection of your money being held in someone else's account is gone. It's not insured because they were reckless with it. So they call it commingling customer segregated funds with propriety funds. It's not a fraud, it's not a crime, it's not a good business practice, but none of your money is protected. And if they lose it, it's gone. And I'll tell you, I'll bet you a lot of these financial institutions are dealing with the fact that the money is gone. So they also say the 2007-2008 economic debacle will look like a training exercise, which maybe it was. We know our 5 major banks in the States have prepared themselves for creating stress recovery plans and having these living wills. Federal Reserve has a new policy about money and market funds. Some $2.7 trillion can be frozen in the event of an emergency or financial panic. People want to pull out their money and the funds will be frozen and they won't be able to take them out because it's no longer your money. That is a very, very important thing. So if you haven't feathered your nest, you haven't prepared your lifeboat now, you may never get the chance later. So you should be thinking about it at every little opportunity you can to have things that you need or to pad your assets and be the bank of yourself. Many, many people in this article on Soros have said the same thing. Max Slavo predicted unprecedented economic chaos. Billionaire investment legend John Paulson predicted the subprime mortgage meltdown. Has added a significant amount of gold to his already gold-heavy hedge fund portfolio, an increase of 25% in the last quarter worth some $700 million. He also has large holdings in this SPDR Gold Trust. Billionaire investor Jim Rogers wants Americans to prepare for financial Armageddon. This show is international, so we want all our listeners to prepare for financial Armageddon. Have some readily available cash. Convert things to precious metals if you can. The world is drowning in too much debt, says Mr. Rogers. The solution was obviously not the creation of more debt, which is something I've been saying from day one. That's the only problem. You can't go to these people and say, okay, well, you got a debt problem, we're going to loan you some more money. That's not going to get you out of the hole, it'll get you into a bigger hole. It's not rocket science. Chief investment strategist for Money Map Press, Keith Fitzgerald, has written a report with some other economists about what's going to happen too, and he says the resulting chaos is going to crush Americans. Chris Martinson is a team member in this report, says this event is largely caused by government, could potentially be catastrophic. We found an identical pattern in our debt, total credit market, money supply that guaranteed they're going to fail. This pattern is nearly the same as in any pyramid scheme, one that escalates exponentially fast before it collapses. And as we showed you with that parabolic curve, we won't know when we cross that threshold until after we've crossed it. And then the economic Armageddon will be upon us. So he says, prepare for a potentially devastating or even life-threatening collapse of all the systems humanity depends on for its existence. Few people are prepared to deal with such a major catastrophe. I would say virtually no people are prepared for that. One of the things we have to worry about comes up over and over and over again. It's not so much worry, but the basic necessities of life. Make sure you have food, an ability to get water. One of the things to do might be looking for a natural spring somewhere where you can get water outside of the local plumbing infrastructure, just in case your city's municipal water supply can no longer function and what comes out of your pipes is brown because it hasn't been treated, because all the staff are unemployed or something of that nature. Find yourself a clean source of water somewhere. Make sure you got some food. If it's a renewable source of food, that's even better. Make sure you have, or if you can, have some way to have fuel, especially here like in Canada when the winter comes on, it's flipping cold. It's going to be a nightmare. JP Morgan had some of their financial documents looked over. They had to file their plans, and someone actually read them. So the secret plan for their collapse, and another JP Morgan document at Harvard Law on page 9 described a $150 billion trading loss turning into a $200 billion loss as soon as the FDIC takes over. But they want to write down this loss. Jamie Dimon admitted that JP Morgan is mismarking assets to the tune of $150 billion. On page 10 of this document, it says they have $184 billion listed in equity minus $50 billion loss, and the $150 billion FDIC reality adjustment, making their position negative $16 billion. So even if we get rid of this $50 billion loss, they were only plus $34 billion. So JP Morgan is just a shadow of what it was, and probably most of these other banks as well. You need real hard and fast things. If there's things you need and you got them, get them now while you can, just in case cash hyperinflates or becomes useless. Doesn't hurt to have enough. Euro governments are quietly preparing for a Greek exit. Everybody's putting together an exit strategy for Greece. So this is one of the funny things. Greece was able to raise 4.06 billion euros with the issue of a 3-month treasury bills. They're using that money to pay a $3.2 billion euro repayment due to the European Central Bank on Monday. So as my dad used to say a lot of time, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Or you're using your Visa to pay your MasterCard, your American Express to pay your Visa. And these people are at the top. They got PhDs, they have tenured positions in government, and they're dumber than a stump. Because even an idiot, or as I like the word, imbecile, even an imbecile has to realize that's a non-starter. Finland has said that they are prepared for a breakup. You gotta love the Finns, small country, 4 million people. They call themselves a rich country, and they probably are because they got the thinking caps on, the lights are turned on, everything's ready. They have contingency plans for everything. You can vote for people like that. They have these contingency plans for everything, including getting out of the European Union because it's going to fail. And then they talk about the cost of the breakup would cost more than the short or medium term than the billions spent keeping the ailing currency on its feet. Yes, the short and medium term, but what comes after short and medium term? The long term. And then it's the opposite. It's going to cost way more to keep it than it is to bail it out with these short-term little things. So it's just insane. Cut your losses. It hurts. Say goodbye. But the big thing, it's an ideological issue where these globalists have to have the big Europe. Got to have this Europe. It's a dream. It's a fantasy. It's not real. It's an illusion. Because it defies the laws of economics. The economy of scale. It can never exist. It could never exist. It's just too big, too monolithic. Corruption, inefficiencies will just tear it apart. But once you realize that it's torn apart, and just like in our train picture where you go off the tracks off the bridge, stop the train, get off, get on another train, go in another direction, and then the catastrophe doesn't happen. Simple. Greece wants a 2-year extension. They're struggling to find another $9 billion in cuts. The Eurozone countries could cut off lending. And of course, taxpayers are on the hook, and they're becoming Eurosceptics. See, that's like a disease. If Europe really got going then the authorities could come to your door and put you in a mental hospital like a former American Marine because you didn't agree with the great thought merchants. Germany may become the country that brings the euro crashing down. In German press, you have all kinds of things. Greece must go bankrupt. Multiple countries must leave the euro. Germany's trillion-dollar liability. The current imbalances will blow Europe apart. Germany must withdraw from the euro. All these things are in the German press, but they don't make it outside into the corporate press. There's supposed to be a eureferendum.com site that posts a lot of these German news issues so that you can be on the cutting edge of what you need to know. Let's see here. What's this one here? While the euro and the dollar die. Let's try that one.
Everybody's minds, and rightly so. While the euro and dollar are dying a slow and certain death, savvy investors, sovereign nations, and even particular far-sighted American states are pursuing the pot at the end of fiat money's rainstorm. Gold, that is. Pure, radiant, luminescent gold. Vladimir Putin, always on top of his game, is working with Angela Merkel, differences in worldview and affiliations notwithstanding, to establish a Moscow-Berlin axis complete with a gold-backed monetary system aimed at replacing the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And did you know that China, foreseeing the inevitable demise of the euro and the dollar, has installed its first gold dispensing ATM machine in Beijing, with 2,000 more to come? India, not to be left out, in response to popular demand for real money, is distributing gold coins in its post offices, while here in America, the best we can bargain for are commemorative stamps. Recently, the state of Utah celebrated a new law that made gold and silver legal tender for its own people. Many legislators from other states attended this very first Utah Monetary Conference, which put forth a financial declaration of independence whereby it could opt out from the Federal Reserve Bank's perpetual debt enslavement, whose ownership and oversight is in the hands of international Jewry. The watershed of our economic collapse that millions of jobless men and women are undergoing the swelling impact of was the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act at the turn of this, the 21st century. President Clinton, acting under orders from his kosher cabinet and relentless pressure from conniving fellow Jewish bankers, which included Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, Sanford Vale, and Alan Greenspan, knocked down the last remaining fence that prevented retail banks, brokerage firms, and insurance companies from merging into one collective shyster money-making machine. As we all know, the countless foreclosures tell a tragic story. The housing market eventually collapsed due to Clinton's repeal of Glass-Steagall. Thus today, bereft of property tax revenues, U.S. states are going belly up. Since that fateful housing bubble crisis in 2008, states have slashed some 500,000 positions, with an additional 300,000 cuts planned by the end of 2012. With our factories now sent overseas, Jewish finance capital, which underwrites the stocks of U.S. corporations and therefore dictates policy, has replaced our blue-collar workers with names like Chow, Fang, and Wong, and our white-collar workers with names like Aravinda, Deepak, and Mahatma. And it's going to take a lot more than a Gandhi to put it all back together again. The choice is between the private enrichment of Wall Street Jewish bankers or the public enrichment of a nationally owned financial system under responsible leadership whose loyalties are to the interests of the people first. We can begin the process, as Ron Paul urges, by ending the Fed that gouges Americans with interest-bearing debt, as well as inflation around the world for every dollar it prints. And while the euro and dollar dies, monopoly money, owned and administered by global Jewry that controls all that is bought and sold. All the experts agree that you get out of the euro and dollar fast and fill your portfolios with pure, radiant, luminescent gold.
Okay, well, we apologize for the flash. If you got the flash, it was just kicking up a storm in here for some strange reason. But the good Orthodox brother has many opinions. Some of them we can agree with or don't agree with, but we have free speech, and he had a lot to say, and a lot of it was very, very important. I look at the banking situation as not necessarily a Jewish conspiracy. That's something that's overused a lot. It's just an elitist conspiracy of the ultimate rich of many, many, many different faiths, countries, and such, wanting to have you under their thumb. Some can be any race, creed, or color at any given time in a moment. So that's something I'll agree to disagree with our speaker. But overall, his idea of what's happening in the economy and the fact that you only have one protection, pretty much gold, is very important, as we've talked about before. It's the Vatapita ministry there in Greece, that a good Orthodox country, that has tons and tons and tons of gold and laid away there, and might be one of the reasons why the New World Order is putting them under a lot of pressure to get their assets at bargain basement prices. But they're under the control of the Orthodox Church more than the Greek state, even though they are working hand in hand to maintain that fortune. It goes way back to the Knights Templar and such like that. They took a lot of that gold up into the hills by donkey. This article, we can break free from the shackles of Brussels. It's almost funny to a degree, but some countries that had some chutzpah, like Norway and Switzerland, just said no, to a great extent, to the European Union, because they realized it's a straitjacket. So in this article, the author talks about Britain primarily, saying how they shackled themselves to a corpse with this European Union, and they made a big mistake. This is something I wrote a British Prime Minister, I think it was Major back in the day, about the European Union and what's going on. I actually got a reply, I should frame it, but I just said, this is wrong. If there's any sort of union that should be made, the union should be with the former British colonies like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Britain in a global sphere. Because we got the same language, the same background, a lot of the same practices and policies. And lo and behold, in 2012, somebody figured that out. That's just absolutely amazing. They also include the Indian subcontinent and many Caribbean nations as well. They also said in that letter that we should ally our central banks and do the same thing, fight for our brothers. When one country is under economic warfare tactics by some shadowy organization, that an allied central bank buys our currency to get the short sellers in the cojones. And in those days, Canadian dollar was, was 65 cents value in U.S. currency. Now we're at parity, because the Bank of England did come to the rescue one time and gave those boys in Chicago a good knuckle duster and laid them out. They lost millions and millions and millions. It cost me just a few minutes to write it down on a piece of paper, put it into an envelope, and lick a stamp and put it on there. And someone thought it was a good idea, and they wrote back to me and said, that's a good idea, we're going to do that. And we do that a lot now in various central banks. So sometimes it just takes one person to just get off their ass, or in that case I had to sit on my ass because I had to use the typewriter, and just do something. Do it from your heart. God will direct you through your soul and the Holy Spirit to say, is this the right thing to do? And you just do it. So what would we be paying for gold if we were still 65 cents or lower, if they kept short selling us into the dungeon down to 50 cents? So it's like 2 Canadian dollars for an American dollar. How would we live? Where would you be? I licked the stamp, put it on the envelope, changed the paradigm. Simple. Just gotta do it. Not that I like Nike, but that's a good motto. Do it. So this single market, this European Union, is just a hornet's nest. So they say in Britain, the wealth of the EU as a whole brought them 120 billion euros. Cost them 600 billion euros in business regulations. Okay, you do the math. I get 120 billion and I lose 600 billion. Great idea. We need more unions. Maybe we can work on the North American Union. See, they're all doing that too, right? They want to take us down. See, this train's going off the tracks at high speed, might destabilize the whole global economy. What are our leaders going to do? Hey, we can have a train like that. Prime Minister Harper, Obama, the Mexican president, they can all get together and say, we need a North American Union. We can do that. We can make our own train and just drive it off the tracks. Because we're going to defy the laws of economics and the economy of scale. That's how smart we are. You put these people in power. That must be God's revenge on you. Kick them out. Kick them out. This whole concept is nothing but an anathema. All this free trade is designed to destroy, not to build or pick you up in any way, shape, or form. It's just good for very select rich people or corporations and nothing more. One of the graphs we have here, national debt, 1940 to the present. This is the U.S. national debt. So, you know, back here they were at war, right? 1940, 1945. Nice to go back to those days, even with that kind of spending. And we get up to 2005 is the last printed number, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so this graph is short because now we're into 2012 and we could be like way off my screen here. This is what you've done. This is what we allowed to happen because basically nobody did anything. So back in 1971 they had something called the Smithsonian Agreement. Replaced the world's fixed exchange rate, where a dollar was worth a fixed amount of gold, with a floating exchange rate. The abolition of U.S. dollars' convertibility into gold. The dollar effectively became a fiat currency where it stays today. In 1974, the bankers met in Switzerland on the Rhine. See, when bankers are meeting, that's the time to probably get tactical battlefield nuclear weapons aimed at them and just save the world a whole lot of trouble. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. So what they did is national debts of both the United States and Canada began to soar. Both nations stopped printing money that they needed and instead began to borrow it from private banks with no explanation to the taxpayer. Well, it's a very simple explanation, you see. Just like the waiter who comes up to you in the restaurant, you know, and you didn't tip him, so he holds out his hand like that, you know. Hey, slide a few shekels there in my hand and, you know, you get a better meal and I won't spit on your food. Right? That's how it works. So the banksters come up and they just say, hey, you know, you're not going to be like finance minister forever, like Ernie Eves here in the province of Ontario. You know, you could get a nice job when you're done at the Credit Suisse Bank and make $1 million US, at that time when our dollar was really, really low. Big incentive there, just to like do nothing. Like we give you an office and, you know, you get the hookers and the cocaine and we put your name on a sign and it says you got a big important job here, and you know, we'll train you and teach you what to do when we want to go back. And then they wanted him to go back and privatize Ontario Hydro and turn it into like an Enron situation. And he came back and took over a political party and we voted for him. Then you got to scratch your head and you're going, okay, guy's making $1 million a year US in his super job, and he quits and gives it all up so he can come back into politics, works way harder, way longer for like maybe 15% of what he's making in industry. Because he's a real nice guy and a patriot, or he's just a lackey of these big banks. And we vote for him. China launching a gold-backed global currency. So China's prepared. They've got a contingency plan, it appears. They're recalling their gold. They're taking it back from all the places like London, New York, and Switzerland that are probably loaded with all kinds of crooks who take the gold out of your teeth, and they're bringing it back home. And they're melting it down. See, they're not stupid. They're not going to fall for the old tungsten in the gold trick. So they're melting everything down and converting the English system to the metric system, of course, in the process. So ounces will go into the metric system, kilograms and all that sort of thing. So very, very wise on their part. Other countries are doing this as well, and it makes good sense. Canada doesn't have a great central bank supply of gold. We're at the bottom end of the equation, but that's where you as individuals can scratch up a few ounces on your own or get into silver, palladium, platinum, something like that, as a bit of a backup. Can't hurt you any, because you got an ounce. It'll always be an ounce. The dollar value means nothing, and it'll be worth something. And your cash dollars, or now not paper anymore, or plastic dollars, could just disappear in a heartbeat. So even as a suggestion for people who don't have any great investment portfolios, even if you canceled your vacation, or you did something, put off a big expenditure like a new car, bought a used car, and converted the difference into precious metals, that might be enough to pay off your car and your house or a few things down the road, because it can grow exponentially in value as the currency deflates exponentially in value. So I don't even think it's such a bad idea to even buy a little bit on an unsecured loan or credit or something like that, because it's still money and you can always pay it back. But if you don't have it, and the boat sinks or the train goes off the rails, you don't have it. There's no getting it then. It might get to a point where it goes contango and you can never afford it again. Are the government and the big banks quietly preparing for an imminent financial collapse? Yes. Biggest banks in America develop plans for staving off collapse. Hundreds of banking executives resigning. Corporate insiders buying prepper properties. Barack Obama signing a whole bunch of executive orders. The living wills that they have. It's very, very clear that this is happening. Nigel Farage, today MEP, Member of the Year of Parliament, Nigel Farage, with King World News about what he described as the possibility of a really dramatic banking collapse. He also warned that the central planners want to enslave and imprison people inside a new order. He described the situation as horrifying. Well, that explains it all very, very clearly. Why they want the guns, why you got things like the National Defense Authorization Act, why they want total control of all your money, because they're just going to steal it. It's like the same thing they did to the Jews in World War II, right? You steal all their money and you kill them. Who gets the money? Well, nobody left. I guess I got to keep it. This quantitative easing isn't going to work. It just makes hyperinflation. The only thing you can do is change the system. Get out of the debt money system. Then this Chris Martinson, VP of Fortune 300 company, we found an identical pattern in our debt, total credit market, and money supply that guarantees they're going to fail. This pattern is nearly the same as in any pyramid scheme, one that escalates exponentially fast before it collapses. Governments around the globe are chiefly responsible. And that's what's really disturbing about these findings, is that the pattern isn't limited to our economy. We found the same catastrophic pattern in our energy, food, and water systems as well. These systems could all implode at the same time. Food, water, energy, money, everything. That's financial Armageddon. Greeks are facing a big crime wave, of course, because so many people took their money out of the banks. Part of the parcel is you have to provide your own security. It has to be put somewhere where somebody can't get it. The biggest thing to have is secrecy, that nobody knows where you put it. Dress poor. Don't dress rich, because when this time comes, people are going to be looking for things to take as a matter of survival. It could get very, very nasty. One of the nasties was 75-year-old woman, Nikki Yakakopoulou, went to the bank. Man followed her home, thought she was bringing home her pension check riches. She goes into the lobby of her flat. He slugs her in the head with a pipe and bludgeons her to death. And she really didn't take home any great amount of money. Her son found her dead in the lobby. So for seniors, or people who have seniors, it's time to start moderating your behavior and where you go. You can't, see, that's the thing. You want to go where you go. You always got to go like you're walking in the jungle. You're 75 years old, you're going to the bank, you should be going with a couple of tough young sons. You got to provide for your own security. You got to start looking over your shoulder. You got to start being prepared. You got to start getting away from being what generally in the police world we used to call HUA, head up ass, because then you leave yourself wide open. You got to be aware of your circumstances, who's watching you, who's following you. doing things at different times in different manners just in case. My grandfather had the same problem when he was retired, but he was a World War II vet. So the guy who tried to rob him after he went to do his pension business at the Polish Credit Union on Roncesvalles got the surprise of his life. And he was lucky to live, maybe, to talk about it. I was small then. I just remember the police bringing him home. Guy pulls a gun on him. The grandfather does a carotid pinch on his throat, picks him up off the ground with 2 fingers. The man worked in manual labor all his life, laying tracks for the railroad, doing farm work. He could bench press a small car if he had to. He had a size 18 ring finger. You get 2 of those things, one on each side, lifting you right off the ground so the feet are going like this. That's enough. You can knock out in 2 seconds, right? Because there's no blood going to your brain anymore. If you don't let go, the man's going to die. And because, you know, he was a soldier, like, you know, like that Marine, right? You're used to killing and being tough a little bit, right? So he slugs him with the other mitt, breaks his nose and knocks out his front teeth, and the guy collapses into a pile of goo on the floor. I guess the cops got to keep the gun because that was the old days. So you got to be prepared and watch out for your circumstances. He could look after himself. You may not be able to. So when you start planning where you're going, what you're doing in times of toughness, even with food and water, prepare for your security. Sometimes I wish I could have you all in a big room and teach you a lot of techniques and tactics on guarding. We talked about that when we did that film, Year Zero. Still archived on our website, still archived here at that channel. Don't wait till you die to learn something. It's too late. If you can avoid a deadly force encounter or some kind of inhospitable thing, the criminal's going to look for the weakest link in the chain. Don't you be it. Another young fella, home invasion robbery. Something you're going to have to be prepared for too. Guy comes in, puts a knife to his mother's throat. Okay, the guy leaves with some stuff. Probably better to lose some stuff than mom. The next house they break into is the neighbors. He hears them screaming for help. That's enough. Grabs dad's shotgun, goes out in the street. Ba-boom! Goodbye, bastard. Of course, he's up on charges or in jail for something, but all the neighbors think he's a hero. This is a chap by the name of Vasilis Davaris. Gotta love you, brother. You fought for your neighbors, you fought for your brother. It's a Christian thing to do. And of course the media comes up with that one of, you know, he took the law into his own hands. Well, you see, it's supposed to be in our hands. Whose hands is the law supposed to be into? Generalissimos? The chief of police? The gangster? The politician? No, the law is in the hands of that document that was in that Marines video there. It said it had this piece of paper, started out with "we, the people." That's whose hands the law is in. And that's who these other people are supposed to serve. See, we got the cart in front of the horse. It's the other way around. Red alert, the great collapse is coming. The banks will own you. This gets into Anne Barhart again. Sounds like a very noble woman. What is money? Money is a commodity used as a medium of exchange. Like all commodities, it has an existing stock. It faces demands by people to buy it and hold it. Its price, in terms of other goods, is determined by the interaction of its total supply or stock, and the total demand by people to buy and hold it. People buy money by selling their goods and services for it, just as they sell money when they buy goods and services. Nice little definition. I like that one. In disaster situations, the value of money changes. Hyperinflation can collapse the system's core currency, which could ultimately be the US dollar. There are multiple phases, the first phase being the crunch, the period of time directly preceding a collapse, and the collapse itself. So in this crunch period, that's a time when you might be able to use what's left of this currency. People will be cleaning out the bank machines or whatever they can get and spending it before people really realize the train went off the track, and getting things you need, the things that they talk about like food, water, fuel, and anything else you need, because sooner or later this money is going to collapse to zero. In the crunch, precious metals will be the primary bartering tool. You can't eat your gold though, so getting these other tangible goods is very, very important. because nobody's going to want to part with something they really need, your last gallon of gas or your last bit of food, for gold or anything else, because they need it. In the traditional black market economies, there was always two products that were very, very important: liquor and cigarettes. Liquor stores very well, cigarettes do not. But for the smokers, they'll give up their food to get a smoke, and the drinker will give up his food to get a drink. Sad but true. They recommend silver as something far more barterable, because you can't break an ounce up into too many pieces, especially when contango comes in and is worth like 30,000 an ounce or something like that. But the silver would be having a good water filter, something that can do a lot. Purification tablets. Food. You can never have enough. It's also a bartering item if you have enough. They also mention baby formula as something a lot of people will want. Seeds. The three uses are food: for your personal use, for charity, and for bartering. Something to think about. Fuel, you can never have enough. If there's a collapse in the fuel supply, especially in places where you need it for heat, you're up against the wall. But to have gas, diesel, propane, kerosene, you can't have enough. Trouble is, it's dangerous to store. And then something for your personal security. If you're in a place where you can have firearms for whatever reason, get them. If you're in the States, you can have a concealed carry permit. The laws of self-defense are okay. Get one. Take courses. Understand. You go to one of these schools in the States for the concealed carry, though, you're going to learn enough, way more than I know about shooting in a place like that, very quickly. Because it's not just having something, it's knowing how to use it. And even more importantly, it's knowing how not to use it. Because force can escalate, and then you have to have a brain to turn on sometimes to realize you've got to a point where you have to de-escalate. I don't think that's something they teach our police too often anymore. We had a big shooting in South Africa. 34 miners were killed in a strike. Maybe we can look at some of these pictures while we're talking about this. This is the state of the New World Order as it's going to be. This is the dystopian world. This may have been a training run to get it going. Buying all these bullets and things like that for the department. They usually do that around the world, as they'll have some kind of training run. So you see, they come to the strike, everybody's prepared. They got all these tactical weapons. They're prepared to go to Afghanistan, people. You're not. And then you have just like a classic battle line like you'd have from, an age-old movie like Zulu Dawn. You have the strikers around there at the field, and you have all the police and security forces lined up here with shotguns and fully automatic weapons. And now these guys charge them with machetes and stuff like that. Not exactly the best strategy. General MacArthur was very, very clear on a lot of this stuff. You don't hit them where they are, you hit them where they ain't. Big mistake. They hit them where they are. 34 were killed. So this is some of the skirmishing. They're out in the open, no cover. The types of weapons they have, of course, are clubs and spears and machetes and stuff like that. So the police were legally justified to use deadly force to respond, because they could have been killed. 2 policemen were hacked to death by some of these strikers previously. So, being nice didn't work. The typical riot situation with the rocks and bottles, but that's how this is just a strike. They're not fighting over the last bit of food. This is what it looks like from their end, and then you'd have to say you're an idiot to charge that, but they had lots of bullets. And this is from the other side looking back. That's why sometimes you almost think this is a staged training operation, because you've got all these big glossy photos of this confrontation. So they attack just almost like the Zulus in these old battles. And then here's just some plain old strikers. Don't know if these were ones who were shot and killed or whatever, but they were well prepared to deal with whatever had to be dealt with blunt instruments and sharp instruments. Total shame that human life was lost. But this is the future. The New World Order has planned for you. Yeah, we can get rid of that part now, and I can keep my privacy. So this is implemented along a large scale. The National Weather Service is buying ammunition. Lots of it. 46,000 rounds of hollow point ammunition. Social Security purchasing 174,000 rounds of hollow point ammunition. And 500 paper targets. That's going to have a lot of holes in it if you only got 500 targets. And then the NDAA was in a lawsuit. Of course, they don't talk about that either. Mainstream media blacks it out. So you got to change the channel. If you're smart, change the channel. You could come to that channel here, Bay and Dundas, Toronto, that channel. We'll talk about stuff they won't talk about. Could save your life. Maybe you learn something. Save your fortune. Or have something to eat. That's got to be worth something, right? You don't have to live in the apocalyptic nightmare. That's got to be worth something. You don't get sucked into the war. You don't get sucked into all kinds of things that they have for you. With this NDAA, you can see very clearly that America's heading for some nasty times. Mainstream media blacks it out completely. Section 1021, which Obama signed into law December 31st, the government could lock up U.S. citizens indefinitely without trial. And Obama penned, as they say, a pathetic letter, basically said he signed it, but he won't use it. Right. Let me sleep with your daughter. I won't have sex with her. Yeah, my grandfather threw you out the windows. You wouldn't even get a chance to pen a pathetic letter. So he's showing his true colors. And they go to this appeal with Judge Catherine Forrest, which he issued in May, to deal with a lawsuit filed by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges and others. The NDAA clearly vaporizes the Fifth and Sixth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution and clearly targets the First Amendment. Because the government can arbitrarily lock up anyone and throw the key away while trying to instill fear in people so that they self-censor their speech and become too afraid to criticize the elite political and economic oligarchy. But that's where those miners in Africa got the edge over most of the weak-kneed weaklings in the rest of the world. Sometimes you got to stand up to them, even if you take some casualties, and just say enough is enough. To get that global world condemnation, sometimes these sacrifices are made. They were always made in the past to get us that far, and sometimes there's installment payments. That's just a sad, sad fact of life. One of the lead plaintiffs, Tangerine Boland, U.S. government lawyers asserted even more extreme powers, the right to disregard entirely the judge and the law. So they're going to ignore her decision to stand things aside. Government attorneys refused to provide assurances to the court that the plaintiffs would not be indefinitely detained for engaging in First Amendment activities. They refused to define a lot of the definitions in this law as one specifically an associated force. So if I laugh and joke about the fact that, hey, they got one on you, I'm an associated force with terrorism, this is a law that is an anathema. Government attorneys again presented no evidence to support their position and brought forth no witnesses. Section 1021, the provision that permits reporters and others who have not committed crimes to be detained without trial, has not been applied by the U.S. government anywhere in the world after Judge Forrest's injunction. Well, who knows? They did extraordinary rendition before. They may very well have done it again, and you just don't know. The only way to stop this stuff is like in that movie that Angelina Jolie was in. You go to the media, to people who are smart enough to change the channel and stand up for what they believe in. And then you go down to City Hall and you just start screaming and screaming and screaming until you let them go. If you have some leaders that are strong enough to say, as that age-old quote from many, many times used, let my people go until it's done. Because if you don't fight for your brother, I guarantee you, you might have to try to fight for yourself, or maybe there won't be anybody left to fight for you when the time comes. How the U.S. military plans to kill Americans. This is a novel. I'm sure one that's read well at night by a lot of our globalists. Full spectrum operations in the Homeland, a vision of the future. So retired Army Colonel Kevin Benson paints a bleak picture facing Americans in the years ahead is co-author Jennifer Weber of Princeton University. The middle class is mired in a Great Depression. Roving bands of angry white Americans attack minorities perceived to be in the country illegally. This is where you fail by trying to assert the blame on other victims. It's like they said in previous articles from the academics and experts. It's the government, the elected people that are under the control of the banksters, gangsters, and thieves who are responsible for this. To pick on another innocent, aggrieved party, whether they're in your country illegally or not, is immaterial. They're patsies and victims of all this too. So we have to understand that as part of the basic Christian tenet that all men are your brothers. To arrest and return your country back to what it's supposed to be is constitutionally sound. To pick on other people, other victims, is wrong. Completely and totally wrong. So there's a full-scale insurrection of government officials. In May 2016, an extremist militia takes over the government of Darlington, South Carolina. They remove the chief of police, disarm the local police, and the county sheriff's department. Many law enforcement officials will not challenge the takeover. Wise move, probably. The angry Americans who rightly feel that their government at all levels has become tyrannical and no longer abiding by the compact, the U.S. Constitution. And that's very important. We have contract law and constitutional law walking the same path. You are allowed to govern, but you have to use these rules. And you're not allowed to change those rules because they're carved in stone. God-given rights only God can take away, and you're not God. So they invoke the Declaration of Independence. The current form of the federal government is not deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed, but is actually destructive to these ends. The people can alter or abolish the existing government and replace it with another that will. And that's how America was set up. It was set up with that safety valve. In case of tyranny, break glass. Inside the glass was the firearm. Second Amendment wasn't for hunting or target shooting. It was for the liberation of the state if someone tried to take control of the mechanisms of state. The governor asked the federal government to step in, seeking the assistance of the Department of Homeland Security. Right away they go, hey, we still got 750 million rounds left we didn't use. They mobilized the U.S. Army. Provisions as outlined in Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Suppress an insurrection against the state government. Suppress unlawful obstruction or rebellion against the U.S. It's unlawful. It's not unlawful to take your government back from somebody who stole it from you and shredded your Constitution. But unfortunately, it's the law of the jungle is the overriding law. Might makes right. Also, suppress insurrection of domestic violence. Say part of the citizens are deprived of their constitutional rights, so the people who stole other people's constitutional rights will mobilize an army and come and get you. That just pretty much comes down to what you can classify as civil war. And there is a chap who has come up to talk about civil war in that regard, what he calls the Cold Civil War. He's a former U.S. Navy SEAL. He's become quite popular in mainstream media, so sometimes I have to wonder or be concerned about the fact that he may not be a plant. But his name's Benjamin Smith. He wrote a piece called Our Cold Civil War. He warns America's in the middle of a cold civil war which is about to turn hot as the Obama regime running our country into the ground prepares to impose martial law. Now, of course, he's not arrested and thrown in jail as a mental case. They pick on another Marine for that. So maybe he is their dog. But he says nonviolent and civil, as in nationwide, is his definition as cold civil war. The National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order is a blatant attempt to stir trouble of the highest intensity, poking us to see if we will go over the top and do something so stupid that there will be a crisis, provoked enough to rise to that proverbial bait to to lower the hammer, all in the name of national security and public safety. So he looks at this as a training style, like a Soviet-style tactic designed and implemented in effect to make us react, to get us to either flinch and shut up or overreact and get suppressed. The exercise also gathers intelligence on what we do, think, and respond to these things. He says, many of us are trained, we know this game. I know that game too, it's world global domination. So it's very clear that this is a multifaceted attack on you to see what you're going to do. Will you be provoked or will you crawl in a hole? And if you do get provoked, can we beat you into the hole? But from their perspective, they're putting you in the hole. He goes on in his article to talk about, maybe he listens to my show because we're looking at this in exactly the same way. In quantum theory, there's a concept called singularity or a black hole. The black hole cannot be seen. The actual truth and facts of the world situation and the intentions of the U.S. government must be judged by the influence exerted on the objects around it. Extortion, manipulation, intimidation, SARS, fascist overregulation designed to purposefully strangle an economy and legislate away our right to defend and provide for ourselves. Force you into the food line of dependency and powerlessness. So that's how we said too about how you can speculate, postulate that there's an invisible hand or a force, the secret societies controlling and working our government. It's just the same as physics, where you can see how there's something in space based on the fact that things react around it. He used the black hole. I also talked about gravity, that you could maybe know there's a planet somewhere that you can't see by just knowing the things around it react to something that is unseen. So we know it's there. He says, do something. I agree. You have to do something. Because if you don't do something, well, I don't know if you ever want to be in that boat. Because if the cold Civil War ever turned hot, it would just be like Syria. And that's no place we want America to be, or any other country, really. One of the other little anecdotes to this chap is he was Andrew Breitbart's bodyguard, an unpaid volunteer in his surmise, but we'd have to wonder, as a reporter with a top Navy SEAL bodyguard, how'd you get whacked? They took you out very, very easily. The ultimate goal for the New World Order is to get us through Agenda 21 into these eco-cities, sustainable prisons of the future. They expect by 2030 to have 4 billion people living in eco-cities where everything will be mandated, how much water, energy, food, and production is allowed. You will just live like a hamster in a cage. Maybe they'll be good to the hamsters in the cage, and you can run in the little wheel to make green energy and have a little bottle to suck on to get your water. Maybe somebody will come and clean out your cage once in a while. But there'll be no such thing as any type of individual liberty or freedom of movement. Basically, you'll just be in a giant prison colony. Maybe the colony will be disrupted to the point where movies like Escape from New York or Escape from LA exist. Because people have had enough of being oppressed, even in this good-intentioned, well-intentioned eco-city, and revolt and say enough is enough. Let's see here. What do we got here? Okay, let's do this Australian gun ban thing just to show you what happens in one country where they tried to take all the arms. First you have your massacre, like they did in Tasmania. They had the gun bill already written. No conspiracy there. And just fortunate, we were right on top to be on top of that. False flag operation, suck you into an emotional debate that you can't help but lose, because people react emotionally to circumstances. They know all that already. And then we disarm the local civilian population and prepare you for what we have to do. Whether it's to be putting you in an eco-city, locking you up in a prison, the equivalent of a FEMA camp, we showed one in Australia before, or just genocide you. Now, considering the strategic changes in Southeast Asia, and how China could be uninvited guest maybe of Australia, It's kind of funny now that the citizens don't have a lot of guns to resist or fight back with now, do they? So the whole reason is we, the people, have to have the powers of state, including the powers of deadly force, and the right to use it under specific circumstances. Just like the military can resist invasion, you should be able to resist invasion, and just like the police can protect a community from a dangerous, despotic criminal, you must have that right too, because the powers of the state emanate from we, the people. But this is what happened in Australia. Let's see, we get this puppy going here.
A gun buyback that forced law-abiding citizens to surrender their firearms in a nationwide roundup and meltdown of all semi-automatic firearms and pump-action rifles and shotguns. 640,000 ordinary conventional firearms confiscated and destroyed.
It was an absolute joke and a tragedy. I actually turned in 3 firearms, and it broke my heart.
I mean, it was 40 years of collecting, and I can't say it any other way than that. I felt sick. I had to hand them in, because if I didn't, I was going to jail.
There's no ifs or buts about that. By taking that gun away from me, they've stolen something from me.
A right stolen by their government, promising safety in return for its gun bans. But now citizens know the frightening truth. The cost of lost liberty can be measured in the loss of life.
It's become very, very obvious, even to Blind Freddy, that the expenditure of $500 million has done absolutely nothing to reduce crime.
It certainly didn't do what the government touted it would do, which was to reduce crime. It hasn't done that at all. In fact, there's been more.
This has been a lot of bull and hasn't really done much to help society and with its problems.
Cold, hard facts the anti-gun forces can no longer escape. Armed robberies have skyrocketed, up 69%. Assaults involving guns rose 28%. Gun murders increased 19%. And a new phenomenon, home invasions jumped 21%. An increase politicians insist they can't explain because they're still trying to legally define what a home invasion is and what the penalty should be.
Part of the difficulty is that there is no clear definition of home invasion in the law.
Never cease to be amazed at the ingenuity of lawyers.
If the politicians want a pay rise, boom, that's done in 20 minutes. But to define home invasion, what a joke.
I have no trouble at all in defining what a home invasion is. I think if someone sets their foot inside your door uninvited, they are invading your home and your privacy.
And victims who have survived home invasions don't need a definition. They've lived through hours of terror. Arthur Field was tied up, his hands and feet taped, his phone lines cut, while 2 robbers ransacked his house.
And they jumped on me and knelt on my chest and grabbed me around the throat because I immediately started calling out, help.
I don't know how many men, they start smashing the windows. There was a lot of glass shattering, a lot of noise outside, and I stood in the kitchen, I was trembling.
The Zawadzkis remember thugs running through their home, demanding money and threatening to kill them. Mr. Zawadsky says if he had a firearm, the suspects never would have gotten away.
Do you will stand, waiting till you get killed? Or you will defend yourself? Tell me true, you will defend yourself.
Scars that never heal, citizens left powerless. But it's criminals who have been empowered and emboldened by the new gun laws because the innocent can't fight back.
What's happening today is that the offender, the bad guys, are happy to break into somebody's house. They're not frightened to break into somebody's house while they're at home.
Citizens deny the right to protect themselves by a justice system that won't.
Well, my opinion of the legal system here is it's absolutely weak. Weak as water. I mean, it's because they've just got no backbone. That the sentencing for various crimes is just pathetic.
And police who can't. They're undermanned and morale has never been lower.
It's very bad at the moment. It's never been worse. Since 1993, we've had a real decrease in over 230 sworn police officers in this state.
These policemen have joined the job, policewomen have joined the job to go out and do it, and they can't even attend at breaks or assaults because there's no vehicle to even get them there. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous.
Gun laws that have backfired. And Australians who have been forced to hide behind bars and deadbolts. Some are even installing extensive security systems because the firearms they still own that haven't been banned have to be locked up, unloaded, and unavailable.
I mean, get real. If I have someone break in here, I've got to go get the bolt, get the rifle, find the ammunition somewhere else, put it all together, and then defend myself if this other person's got a firearm that's going to threaten my life. No way. It doesn't bloody add up.
A political fraud, gun bans that haven't made a difference, and gun owners now struggling to stop a growing momentum against them.
The people pushing the removal of guns from the Australian society are already saying that's only the first step. Publicly, that's only the first step. Now we want the handguns, we want every other firearm.
They're warning to Americans, don't think it can't happen to you. It can, and it already is.
Unless you, as a firearms owner, get off your butt now and start to oppose those that want to take them off of you right here and now, I would say that within 5 to 10 years, the restrictions on gun owners in America will be similar to what happens in Australia.
Don't trust your politicians. Get in there, keep on their backs. Be a member of the NRA, be a member of your local gun club.
Be part of the NRA and never, ever, ever give up your freedoms, because that's, in the end, that's all you've got.
If you think you have rights, tomorrow the government can take them away from you.
I think the Americans have to be very, very careful because, you know, their rights will be quickly eroded as ours have, and we don't have a chance in hell of getting those rights back.
You don't have a chance in hell of getting those rights back. Very, very true. It's just unbelievable. What's most unbelievable is all these gun owners obeyed the law and they registered all their guns. You see, you fell for the bait. Oh, we just want to register them. And once they find out what you got and where it is, then they sucker punch you from the side and take them all away from you. Happens every time. It's in the totalitarian handbook. The big mistake they made, you know, we had a big march in Canada twice to go to our capital, Ottawa, when they passed various firearms laws. I went to the first one. And it was a sweet old lady, a good friend of mine. Well, she wasn't that much older, but much more mature than myself, a friend of my ex-wife's. And we became very, very good friends. She was like a second mother to me. She was like my right hand in dealing with the media, debating things. Miss her like there's no tomorrow. But, you know, when you hear it from this sweet, sweet, kindly woman, wish we had it taped to play it back to you or something like that. So we go to this protest and do our thing, and she just comes up to me after it was over and just said, well, you only made one mistake. I go, oh yeah, what's that? Like, you know, it was hundreds and thousands of people went to this. All across the country, people showed up to go to this big mass protest. To show you how, you know, dangerous these law-abiding gun owners are, even though there's thousands and thousands and thousands of us going down the streets in Ottawa. When the light turned red, everybody stopped and let the traffic go through. Dangerous despots. She said, you only made one mistake. You forgot to take your guns with you. You just throw them all out while you're there then and there. And that's the big mistake the Australians made too. It's men who got you all those rights in the first place, who stood up to tyranny. They had to fight awesome wars to get it, and that's why you got the right to bear arms. Came after the English Civil War. That's where the Bill of Rights came from, and that's where it was codified that you could have the right to bear arms. Of course, that was after the Inquisition. Nobody doubted it then. You lived through that. And 2 kings in a row just wanted it forever, that is enshrined as the ultimate right, the right to bear arms. The right to protect and defend yourself from basically the state, because the Roman Church took over the English state and people faced one of the greatest civil liberty nightmares in human history. But it wasn't taught to us in school. We didn't learn that. They left it out. So then it's easy for the socialists, the fascists, the cheaters to manipulate us and take us down a false trail and let us have it. because we get sucked into their propaganda. We think it's like real or good or important, that we're doing this lib-left thing to save the world and the flowers. One man did stand up in Australia. He didn't go to jail, he went to his grave, and that was a terrible shame. Everybody knows the character in the movies, Crocodile Dundee, but it was based on a real man. And he wouldn't turn in his guns. And unfortunately, 2 good men died as a result of it. A police sergeant and Crocodile Dundee. In a total waste, because basically what the New World Order is doing is attacking both sides. Organized law enforcement, the military used as pawns, and the victim, the citizen of Australia. Both died. Terrible, terrible shame, terrible, terrible waste. But a mass Second Amendment type protest where tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands walk down the street carrying their gun and just saying, no, you can't have it. And just sitting there and saying, no, you can't have it. And if you want it, come and get it while we're all here together. Strength in numbers. I guarantee you, they're not coming to get it because they're not paying in that much blood. Once it gets started, it's a cat fight. Total cat fight. Of course, we have these people doing what they do best. They organize these false flag attacks. The classic, of course, is Aurora. There's no mistake about what has happened there. Everybody's figuring it out. One of the nurses in Aurora, we'll just go through that quickly, who saw everything. Jennifer Gallagher, drowned while on vacation. It's been described that she was not a very strong swimmer. She went out late at night, allegedly went out in a boat with another person who is unidentified and unaccounted for, and was found dead the next day under a boat dock. So one would have to wonder who the other person was, that they didn't raise the alarm when she fell in the water in the first place. Everything swept under the rug. The local sheriff's department has changed their story multiple times. This is a very detailed article. It's not mine, it's up from another site. The guy did a very good job on it. I wasn't in a good writing mode this week because I had so many things on my plate, but this chap did an awesome story about it. So this Dixon County Sheriff's Department issued conflicting statements and notices about what happened. The only thing we do know is she drowned. And the way things work in America lately, you have to wonder if she was Arkansided. Here's Jenny here with President Obama and the other doctors and nurses at the hospital that treated most of the patients. We have to wonder, did she know something? Her husband says he has no idea what happened to her, and he probably never will. So we have to really wonder if this was an accident or what they call an Arkanside. I bet on Arkanside. It's just too convenient. I just can't understand how this young mother would go out late at night, leave her husband and 5-year-old sleeping, and go out in a boat or go near the water without someone around, or not being a good swimmer, not having a life jacket, or not taking any precautions. Just doesn't make any sense. The fact that stories are changing all the time. Arkanside. No other conclusion. Terrible loss, terrible shame. But that's one of the important things for you and everyone else to understand: the C word, conspiracy. The breathing monsters behind the scenes that manipulate and control you. When you, who could be no fault of your own, come into grips with a big story, a major event, like virtually everyone who was at the Kennedy assassination, who was a compelling witness, was Arkansided, taken out of the game, because they had no idea, no concept of how deep the rabbit hole goes and how profound the enemy is. If you don't learn, you condemn yourself to death. Just like we talked before about taking security precautions. you're a witness to anything or anything, you have to take a lot of security precautions. Remember the DC madam who was on the Alex Jones show talking about the fact, well, I have no intention of committing suicide. They found her hung in her garage or something like that. So even with big media exposure, you got to watch where you go all the time, look over your shoulder, be aware of circumstances. You learn to fight so you don't have to fight. It's like the martial arts law. You learn to fight so you don't have to. Mainstream doctors say supporting the Second Amendment is a mental disorder. So this is another crux of the wooden stake being put into the heart of the citizenry of we, the people, that in conjunction with Big Pharma and a political, medical, psychological behemoth, is they're trying to say, well, if you don't agree with the government, like our Marine, you're nuts. If you believe in the original Bill of Rights, the British Bill of Rights, morphed into the Second Amendment, that you have a mental disorder. Because we have to get you back to the part where you lose all your rights so that we can get you back into the Inquisition again. They put out all the nice lib-left fluffy arguments, but without the understanding of MK Ultra and mind control and how that works, you're at their mercy. You will think it's a good idea and you will surrender all your liberties. Norway police chief quits over the Breivik report, says that they could have done something to stop Anders Breivik from doing what he did. Yes, of course they could. It was a false flag operation from beginning to end. A lot of good blogs on our website, conspiracy-cafe.com. You can find that out. They had an attempt in Czechoslovakia. What happens when psychos are not working for the government? The Czech police grab them and capture them. They got the gun, they got the explosives, they got the guy. Nothing happened because it wasn't a false flag attack. Probably he was supposed to be an Anders Breivik look-alike. Big mission going on. Another ship has left port. This was one that we talked about at the Olympics. This is the Paul Allen's yacht, the Octopus, the one that has the hollow bottom and the submarine inside. It's set sail, baby. It's on its way. It's supposed to be looking for the Belle of HMS Hood, British battle cruiser destroyed by the Bismarck in World War II. They even allege, too, in this article, these ex-Navy SEALs that were on there. Here's Paul Allen with Paris Hilton on the Octopus. We've had a lot of shows about Paris Hilton and some of the things she's been into. This submarine that Octopus has, they also have a remote ocean vehicle, a remotely operated vehicle that's going to go down and retrieve the Belle from HMS Hood. This is the blown up HMS Hood. Big tangled mess with a Belle. That's the Belle in better times. Big 15-inch guns on that baby. She was hit by a 15-inch shell from the Bismarck. That's the Bismarck, blew her to smithereens. They're also attending on this mission. It's supposed to be, you know, sort of a historical, oceanographic type mission. But there's things to read into it. One of the things to read into it is Churchill gave his famous order back in those days, sink the Bismarck. We wonder if this is a code or a hint to sink Germany, to let it go down. A retired Rear Admiral from the Royal Navy is going to go on this journey with them. Retired Rear Admiral Philip Wilcox from the Hood Association. His uncle was only 20 years old when he died on the Hood. There was only like 3 survivors out of over 1,400 men on that ship. But I have my beliefs and philosophies too on some of this. Let's see if we can kick one up closely here. A long time ago, there were some explorers. Oh, maybe this search engine isn't going to do this for me. I have to go to Comrade Google, I think. They were called the Zeno brothers. They were Venetians, and they traveled all over the world. They discovered America long before Columbus. They were written off as a hoax. Their book has been published many long years ago. I have a copy. And let's get straight to the point here. I need the map. And this map came along with their voyages. And they went to Iceland and Greenland. This map is an aberration. A lot of these things don't exist. Bismarck was sunk between, or pardon me, HMS Hood was sunk between Iceland and Greenland, right about here. So they will be traveling into that area. A place of very unique descriptions of many, many things in the journals of the Zeno brothers. Again, are they looking for lost civilizations? Things under the water that we're not supposed to know? Hidden portals to the inner earth? And the bell is just a cover story that brings them into this thing. The Zeno brothers were quite accurate. They said there were hot springs on islands off Greenland. Google can tell me that answer in no time flat, and they did. There were. They said they found an abandoned monastery. If they were the first guys there, how did they have an abandoned monastery? Because people were there long before that. And sure enough, in an archaeological magazine, they were exploring the abandoned monastery. They said something about water being very shallow off Iceland, like there was a sunken island underneath. May very well be. Many of the things we've been told are complete lies and utter fabrications. They always have been. That's why they told us the earth was flat. But we'll have to keep an eye on Octopus and see where she's going and what she's doing. She may be staking out things for the up-and-coming war. A lot of these yachts are used for military purposes. World War II had one called the Southern Cross, Howard Hughes's yacht, that worked as a spy ship. This may very well be a spy ship too, because the most important strategic place on the planet Earth is off the coast of Iceland. Russia's only got a few ships, and if you've got a launch, that's the place you launch from. You can take out Europe and North America with one little task force. And the only thing standing in the way is Standing Force Atlantic, which isn't that big or that strong. Something to think about. Anyway, we give you lots to think about. We'd like to give you a thought too, to think about supporting this show, to think about supporting that channel even as well as a network that brings out alternative thoughts and opinions and does a lot of good work with people who just slave away and slave away. You've got an undisclosed fortune somewhere, put it someplace good. Donate it to this show, keep it going. Keep yourself alive, get tips and hints. Keep the network alive by saying, hey, I like alternative media. I'm sick of CNN, I'm sick of Fox, I'm sick of the liars and the cheaters and the frauds. I inherited a crap load of money, and I'm going to make sure we do something good with it. We can take that power of a blessing like that and turn the world around and free and liberate us all. From my own perspective, even if a few listeners here or there chip in $5 or $10 a month, that's enough to take the weight off my shoulders. It's hard enough to work to support it, study, research, prepare. It's like a one-man operation with a few on the side to feed me some stories here and there. It's a difficult task. Everything you do to help is greatly appreciated by PayPal, check. Just be careful with U.S. postal money orders. If you do send one, leave it blank so I can get my Vietnam veteran friend to cash them for me as a last resort when he goes south. Because we have to change the paradigm. If we don't do it, nobody can. There is nobody else. There's no B team. It's just us. When you see the Patriots, you're looking in the mirror. That's who they are. It's you. You're we the people. There's nobody else anymore. If you don't do it, it can't be done. If I don't do it, it won't be done. We can change it. Aaron is here. Randy's here washing the dishes because he cares about this station and this network, and he wants to make it work. If we turn this into a powerhouse, these people would just fall apart like dust. There wouldn't be an NDAA. You'd live free forever. That's worth a few pesos, I think. Anyway, we've taken up enough of your time. We kept the boys up late. We appreciate you for coming out. This is Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. This is that channel, the one and only, the point of the sword. We'll be with you again next week, as we always are. Thanks for coming out.
less about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain, and no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Ten trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money